Hello and welcome to the Scotland Rugby News podcast with me, your host, Bruce Aitchison from Happiness Egg-Shaped, and the one and only Mr. Gavin Harper from Scotland Rugby News. Hello, sir. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Refreshed after a wee week off last week, so back to it, and plenty going on. So I feel like I've been well and truly back up and running now.
Yeah, well, we're not here to talk about rugby. We're here to talk about Wimbledon. So Katie Bolter is out. Raducanu coming onto court. You'll be a man that's well up to speed with tennis, I would have thought.
All over it. I'm delighted you've given me my day's update there. I actually quite enjoy Wimbledon, but amongst several other things, I have not found a minute's time today to watch anything. So,
I'm on my way to London Village tomorrow, so I might pop into Wimbledon on Saturday for some strawberries and cream because I've just remortgaged the house, so I might hear myself in there. Anyway, enough of that nonsense. Quick word from our sponsor. The Scotland Rugby News is brought to you by S1 Jobs. If it's time to hand in your transfer request, then head over to s1jobs.com and upload your CV today. With thousands of jobs across Scotland, you'll find the one S1 Jobs. So start your search straight after this. We're not having to get up early because the Lions are kicking off at nice times, but it does mean productivity in the middle of the day kind of disappears. I struggle listening to the pundits on the TV. I find the whole, they're not clicking yet. Of course they're not clicking yet. They're 3 games in and they've used about 400 players. Give it stuff like it's on repeat. I actually thought today, like the opposition did well as they should in the first bit when everybody's a bit fresh and preparation is at its best, and then the Lions sort of started to gather pace. I was a little bit sad when Finn went off. I thought if he had another 10 minutes as things began to open up, because he just looks like he's in good shape, good head space, looks excited. Finn looks like he is on it.
Yeah, he does. He looks like this is going to be the Lions tour, that he finally puts his sort of imprint on and comes away and says, do you know what? Like that from my point of view, that couldn't have gone any better. I was probably the opposite. I was absolutely delighted when Finn came off, and I hope I don't see him now for a week because I think I was reading something about the test team, and somebody was saying there's probably 3 players guaranteed in the team, and Maro obviously is captain. Dan Sheehan, I think, at hooker's an absolute shoe-in, but like forget all that. I think you can actually debate the second row a wee bit, even though Maro's captain. But like get Finn at 10 and build that whole backline around Finn, give him the tools that he needs, because I think him and Jamison Gibson Park it wasn't perfect, but like it's never going to be. It's the first time they've ever played. How many times you played a game with somebody and thought, well, hang on a minute, this is like a partnership made in heaven. It doesn't work like that. It takes time. I thought they looked really good. I thought Hugh Jones, a couple of people have replied saying I'm off my head and Hugh Jones was rubbish, but I thought Hugh Jones looked really sharp, considering he's
I not just sharp. I thought he looked big.
Yeah, I did too. I thought I agree with that, and I thought he actually looked like he wanted to and was prepared to use that a bit extra.
There was one point in the second half where he just straightened the line and went in between 2 defenders, just ready for a bit of bosh. I actually thought like he was almost looking not for a bit of niggle, but you know what I mean. It was like you just said there. It was like, right, I'm up for this. I thought, I can't believe folk are saying he was rubbish. I think he probably took a little bit of time to warm up, but I think they all did. Andy's been out for a hell of a time.
If we're talking about partnerships, there's another one. Like, how many times has he played against Bundyaki? But you would never ever get to know all his traits and the little triggers.
Right. See, and on that, I really like Ronan O'Gara. I like his punditry. I like how, and he didn't just agree with commentator and pundit. He challenged them on a couple of things.
Yeah.
But the bit that did annoy me was, I think it was the commentator said, who would you pick in the centre? And he kind of babbled a little bit, and then he ended up explaining himself that he would go with either a Scottish combination or an Irish combination. And I'm not 100% sure I fully agree with that.
No, I don't either. And I think it was interesting. Tom English from the BBC is in Australia, and he asked Andy Farrell about this a couple of days ago, and Farrell kind of bit back and was like, well, we don't describe them as the Scottish centres or the Irish centres. They're all Lions now. And I thought, what an odd thing to be bothered about. And I think, I can't see Andy Farrell saying, well, do you know what? We'll play them in the warm-up games as one of each. But actually we want to see them we'll only consider them as pairings in the test team. I don't think that's right. I do though think Sione's probably ahead. I think way ahead of Bundy at 12 just now. I just think he gives you a lot more options. I think he's maybe not as direct. I mean, he can be pretty direct when he wants, but he's got that short kicking game. He's got probably a better passing game. I just think he opens things up a wee bit more. And I thought for a first start, I thought Hugh Jones was pretty good. Duhan was good when he had the ball, wasn't so good when he didn't have the ball, which I think is probably what a lot of us have come to expect from Duhan over the sort of years. But he's just got to be. I think he's got to be busier and make more of an impact when he does have the ball. I
thought Ian McGeechan, who pretty much walks on water, and as soon as he gets to the Lions, you listen. I liked his analysis of Duhan. It was kind of, he needs to get closer to the ball, like going for it with one hand, like on that kick.
Yeah,
he made it as the best coaches or pundits or anybody does. Sorry, he made it really crystal clear what should have happened.
Yeah,
and then I can't remember. I think it might have been commentary or pundit said, luckily Duhan's massive because he got himself out of it by being able to step and stay strong, and actually turned into a reasonable outcome. But yeah, the try he scored, he had to score it. Sam Warburton made a big deal of him running the tight line to, hold the defence to create space on the outside for Freeman. I'm not sure where Farrell's head is with a lot of these things. I thought the way Finn was finding people, but also that people were there to be found, the way that he was thrown a little bit wider out the back to Daly took one, Jones took one, I think Bundy took one. That's obviously they're repping that in training, but it looked quite slick. It looked like they were getting there, and then the winger coming on a tight line, holding the defence, creating space on the outside. I thought there was flashes of this attack could be quite exciting.
Yeah, I thought that as well. I thought that continued, and like you talked about when the Reds were sort of fully loaded. I think it's difficult to analyse a game like that because I think Sam Warburton said it in commentary. The Lions bench is international starters for their countries, and they're playing against club reserve players. So there's a massive disparity in the quality of the two teams by the end. But I think at the start, even though the Reds fired a few shots, by the way, I thought Hunter Paisami was really good for them. And actually, I wish, I know there's a deal that between Sky, and Sky are heavily involved in the Lions. I wish we made a wee bit more time in the hours build-up to talk about the opposition that for once in 12 years.
I couldn't disagree with you at all there, because, and especially when you've got so many pundits who all need something to say, and it's so repetitive about the Lions, and but they need time as a combination. We know that.
Exactly. And we all know, most people know Hunter Paisami is a pretty straight running 12, but he's played for Australia. but tell us something about the guys who haven't. Give us some insight
Tell us about
into
all the Scottish qualified boys that are playing for them.
exactly all these Jock Campbells. Where do we sign him up? No, look, yeah, and I do feel like we were talking about this just before we came on in a different context, but I feel like some of the questioning from the Sky reporters and stuff is a wee bit cheerleadery. It's a wee bit like, well, that was great, wasn't it? That all went perfectly. On to the next one, instead of, maybe being a wee bit less kind of Lions tinted specs. I think that's.
But there's also, and that's when tours. I'm not excited by the Lions yet. I'm excited by some of the players, but I've not got Lions fever. I'm not sure I'm ever actually going to get back to the peak of '97 because it was so new and I was so excited, and I'm not sure. I hope I do, and I hope I'm wrong. But if we don't give the warm up games to the tests attention, then they become they have less and less meaning, and they become just warm ups. Whereas that's like Nick White said it last week, and if you listen to some of the Stan Sports stuff, which I quite like because it's very honest and Aussie, they said to him, like, you wanted a red hot go at this, didn't you? And he was like, yeah, like we wanted to, like, that's your cup final. That's, although many of those players won't go on to become test players. They won't be like James Lowe and play against the Lions and then 12 years later play for the Lions. So let's hear about them. Let's get excited about it.
Yeah, that's my point. I think we're making, or Sky are doing a good job of making these games seem like, yeah. On to the next one. Remember there's a test series here, but like for these Australian players, a lot of them, as you say, this might be as big as it ever gets. So going.
But educate us, like give us,
Exactly.
because we're not watching, or a lot of people are not watching Super Rugby. Like I'm totally naive to it. I think I said this on a pod before. Was with Sean Lenine a month ago. His knowledge is ridiculous because I think he watches everything.
Yeah.
And I loved listening to him because he was able to tell me about Super Rugby and the players and who's better than who at Super. His knowledge was exceptional. Now, I have not got the time or energy to do that, but hearing him was really engaging.
Yeah.
Sky could be giving me that. Sell your Super Rugby so that, maybe I keep my Sky subscription longer than the Lions so that I can watch them.
Totally agree. Just on that, I suppose we should talk about the Elliot Daly situation. Odds on TJ or Darcy being called up. Should they go if Scotland need to win the Tour for the World Cup? I think it's a hard thing to turn down.
Nobody's turning down. I'm not. I don't. When he first did it, I thought it looked really bad.
Yeah.
And then he played on, and I was like, oh, that's a weird one. Because you didn't get a stinger on your wrist. You got a stinger on your shoulder. You did get a stinger on your wrist. And then when they saw it, they cut to him after, and he had the tackle pad and the ice on. And I thought, he's done. But what I also thought was, I don't think there's a Scotsman who's a replacement for Elliot Daly.
Interesting.
I wouldn't replace Elliot Daly with Darcy Graham.
No, neither would I. But I might send for Tom Jordan because
I'm not sure because Tom Jordan isn't. I know he can play 15, but Elliot Daly's playing 11, 14, 15, and maybe 13. And he's kicking goals from 100 miles away. I'm not sure. Tom Jordan never came into my head, but I did think Darcy's not the replacement for Elliot Daly.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, my first thought was, well, Tom Jordan gives you extra flexibility, that he gives you another centre option, he gives you a 15, and then I thought, you're right, you're probably then counting one of the existing 15s, probably Blair, let's be honest, as a winger, because you want a bit more I think Blair possibly might benefit if Elliot Daly misses the rest of this tour, which I would hope not, because you wouldn't wish that on anybody. But I actually think he's been in really good form. But
not sorry to butt in, not just in good form, but after the Argentina game, and I think I said this when the camera cut to the huddle after the game.
Yeah.
It was Elliot Daly that seemed to be leading the chat, and Otoji was over his shoulder just nodding along. Elliot Daly, I don't know if it was passion or technique or tactical or what it was he was saying, but I thought, okay, there's a guy that lots of us didn't pick in our squad. They're playing I know it wasn't a cap, but it's a test opposition, and he seemed to be the one leading the Inquisition and what happened, and then he, as you say, he's played well.
Yeah, I think so. From that point of view, you would hope he doesn't miss any of the tour, but it looks like he'll certainly miss a portion of it. But yeah, I'm not sure. I worry that the Lions. What I'm trying to say is, I think they've got enough flexibility that they might look at one of the positions that he can play and pick an out and out. So, for example,
I don't think they need Tom Jordan because the centres are already muddled. They're trying to work out if they're going to play Bundy or Sione, Hugh Jones or Ringrose. I think that's already in there.
And I think, like I've just said this elsewhere, but I think if you're looking at the way they set up, if you go 5-3 on the bench, you probably want one of that 4 on the bench. So then one of your centres is missing out. That might not be enough cover, but I think they would take their chances. I think if you go 6-2, which I think feels more and more and more likely, having seen Ben Earl run about in the centres for 15 minutes.
How funny!
When I was trying to work out which back row he'd come on for, and then I saw Bundy had gone off, and I was like, wait a minute.
Especially with I don't know if you saw that thing that Razzie Erasmus is being hailed as a hero again for coming up with the idea that players can play more than one position.
But also, there was a guy 25 years, Roland Reid, that played for Scotland on the wing and in the back row.
Richie Vernon is quietly just up sipping a gin and tonic somewhere going, nah, I've been there, mate. And then Ben Earl comes on at 12, and he's a unit. He's an absolute unit.
Yeah, and you know what you're going to get from Ben Earl playing at 12, don't you? He's not doing much kicking.
No. Funny. I don't know who the replacement would be. It's a tough one. I don't think there's a Welshman. I hope Jack Morgan lasts, and I hope he plays in the Test team.
By the way, he was very good today, wasn't he?
He was excellent. You know, when you were talking about Sheehan's, I didn't think you were going to say Sheehan, but you're right. Gibson Park is class. I think he's your number 9. Yeah. Finn Russell is a Sheehan. He's your number 10. Marrow's a Sheehan, captain, second row, has to be there. I think Jack Conan is the number 8.
So do I. Yeah.
I think he's class. Sheehan, I think you're right at hooker. I don't know, and they mentioned this, and I think you mentioned this on a pod previously about line out options. So Jack Morgan, Jack Conan, 7 and 8. I don't know what that then means. You do at 6. The front row got penalised a few times today. It's the front row's not been that smooth. I don't think. I think there's still. I think Genge might be the starting loosehead.
Yeah, I think he's been really good, and he was really good when he came on today again. He was probably the pick of the pack against Argentina. Just on this, while we're just debating it, nailed on starters so far: Sheehan, Toji, Conan, Gibson Park.
Russell. All the games gone low. Interesting.
Yeah, I think I probably agree with that, to be honest. I think if we take the tartan specs off, I think James Lowe's in that team. I think particularly now, if you're looking at no Elliot Daly, I think you probably want another left, another kicking option. I think that's something he gives you in a test match.
I've said this. I got in an argument with a colleague of mine about this, and I said I don't think it doesn't matter what I think, but I think I don't think it matters what I think of selection, but I do think Farrell would select Lowe over Duhan. Yeah. Freeman's a bit like Pollock. I think the last 6 months has been incredible for those two players, and he can't be too far away from being 14. I wonder about Blair. Blair has to play on Saturday, and I think Ben White will feature on Saturday. And I wonder if Gibson Park is on the bench on Saturday, and that's him until next week. So he gets half an hour on Saturday. But that would then mean Ben White starting, which is not impossible. But I do wonder how he rotates. I do like that we're having to get players to back up, and there's not two discrete squads, one midweek, one Saturday.
It's absolutely brilliant. It's what it's all about. But I also think
it's what it should be.
I think this is going to be an interesting balancing act. What does he do with the two fullbacks now? Because if you lose Elliot Daly, if we presume worst case scenario and say, okay, we're taking Daly out definitely for a week, which even that feels, maybe a bit ambitious. But do you play them both at the weekend? Because neither of them have played. And pick Blair on the wing. I just like...
Or he phones Kyle Stein.
If you pick up one more injury, and I know it's all ifs and buts, but you're then stuck with 3 days' notice to the next game, and you've possibly only got a Marcus Smith, who's, let's face it, a sort of utility player. I don't know.
I've not got Marcus Smith anywhere near the Test 23.
No, neither do I, and I think there's a few of them establishing already. Probably players that feel like they're going to be in the midweek team. I think, unfortunately for him, I think Scott Cummings is going to be one of them. But I just think the competition in the second row is so great, and he didn't have a great game against the Force. So I think Ben White probably at this stage will be one of them. But would it surprise me at all if he snuck onto the bench because of that combination with Finn? Not at all. We talk about combinations, but all of a sudden we could be talking about Gibson Park and yeah, I think that is going to be the starting two. But all of a sudden, if Ben White and Finn just click like they sometimes do for Scotland,
yeah, I get what you mean. And they were talking about this, and Ronan O'Gara was talking about it, and he made quite a laboured point on it's not the player, it's the person combination, which I find quite interesting. And I would kind of like to know more about what he meant by that. The combination bit, you said this, they're all international standard players. Andy Farrell is an exceptional coach, and his coaching team are very, very good. I don't think it's that big a deal to ask somebody who's not played that much with somebody to play for the British Lions. I think they're that good. When I look at the England squad that's away, I do wonder if Feiwa Mabuso, does he... Because, they talk him up, but then...
He's now banned.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, so he got sent off. Holly sent him off last week, and he got.
Right, okay.
So he's now on that tour. I think he can only play one game.
Right, okay. So he doesn't get to go. Okay. So does Henry Slade come? Freddie Stewart's a big laddie.
Freddie Stewart is a big lad. He's actually been talking about moving to 12. which I find fascinating because he's so good in the air that you would lose probably I hate the term, but the super strength of his game would go if you picked him at
But
12.
can you imagine him as the inside chaser in the way Jamie Ritchie is?
I mean, that is a fair point. Yeah, he would be. He would be pretty good at that.
Yeah, I mean, well, we're talking about replacements. I think the progress has been as it should be. The starter games are tough because the opposition are organised, know each other.
Yeah,
these are new teams learning a lot in a short period of time, having to deal with travel. I don't know how much training time there is. I don't have a huge amount of sympathy for that because
yeah,
you can't physically train all the time anyway, but you're spending time with people. They'll be having ridiculous amounts of coffee and team meetings and all those kind of things to get up to speed. They're all very, very good players. I really like it. I like the way they're trying to play. Seeing Finn not having an armchair ride by any stretch, but seeing Finn getting such good ball,
I was
being
going to
able
say,
to
like,
play, bringing others into the game. I thought Shuggy looked really excited, and as you should be on your Lions starting debut. I like there's little bits of relationships. I like the way Bundy is with anybody, but seeing Bundy and Finn kind of having fun together, seeing the way, Jack Morgan, a buddy of mine, I posted something on Facebook saying, I hope this guy does well, and posted a picture of Jack Morgan. And a Welsh buddy of mine made a comment that I really liked and was a sort of a spin on how to support somebody. And he said, I'm just going to read it here. I would usually say he carries the weight of a nation on his shoulders, but in reality, he has a whole nation behind him urging him on. And I really liked that. Lee Hawkins is a mate of mine, and so don't see it as a burden, mate. You've got everybody wants you to do well.
I think one of the bits I liked about that, before we move on to talk about Scottish things, is when he scored his try, he was absolutely delighted. You very rarely now see players show that level of like excitement for.
They get angry. It's
And
like,
and he was proper like buzzing to have scored. And the first person over to him was Ellis Genge. And I thought, like, and there's a clip on the Lions socials of Genge with Finlay Bealham, and like Genge just, and this is not a surprise. I'm prize for stating the obvious, but Genge seems like a really good tourist, and I think he's one of these guys that I saw Dan Sheehan talking about him last week. When he basically said, I didn't think much of him, but now I think he's quite a good guy. When he's on my team, I quite like him. I think he's got a bit of that about him. But I think, I think so far so good from the Lions, and but obviously they've got bigger tests to come.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it. As I say, I'm failing to get overly excited by it because it's far away. It's funny times. It's not really in. It's social media is the way I'm absorbing it because like you say, it's a little bit too sugary and sweet for me with a lot of the coverage of it. But I do like seeing the Scottish boys properly feature and be excited about them, and it's class for them. So no, brilliant. You're talking about Scotland. Obviously, Ben White goes from Scotland to the Lions. So we're back to another player I don't know a huge amount about because I don't watch a huge amount of Premiership rugby. But for Scotland as a progress, it's good to see Gus Waugh being called up.
Yeah, it is, and I've actually written something about this. I think if there is, there's amidst all this talk about Gregor's contract, if there's progress that he can maybe point to, it maybe is that Scotland can go to Fiji and Samoa and play the Maori All Blacks, and actually we're saying, well, like I think Scotland should come home with 2 out of 3 wins, if not 3 out of 3. Despite the fact they're missing all these players. If there was, I think, pre probably Vern Cotter, if you took 10 players out of the team, would have been really, really stuck. I think probably even during Vern's time, that might have still been the case. So
the thing, sorry, just to butt in again there, we weren't taking 10 players out to be the Lions either.
Exactly. These players were very seldom moving up the food chain. So look, I think I'm pleased for Ben White. Gus Warr, I think, has been unlucky. I didn't really understand why he wasn't involved in November. I would probably have had him ahead of Ali Price at that time. But look, he's back involved now. I think, again, if you look at flexibility, Jamie Dobie's possibly going to cover the wing a bit. So then you actually say, well, Gus Warr's going to get a chance possibly at 9 at some stage. So, yeah, good for him. But I think Saturday will be tough for Scotland. I think the Maori will be a handy side, and it could be. I think like most games, that battle up front is going to be the sort of key. And I think it'll be interesting with that in mind, what kind of team Gregor selects.
I was about to say I'm really interested to see the team because there are obviously players like Finn and Ben White and Sione and Shaggy and Blair and Duan and Darcy that kind of pick themselves, but this time you take a lot of those boys out. I'm really interested to see what happens next. And Matt Curry doesn't go, Hutchison goes, didn't seem to fancy him, but now he's in there. Cam Redpath's a winner. But you've got Stafford there, and logically that would make sense. But you've got Tom Jordan, so where does he play, and how do you utilize? I find the whole thing fascinating. I like it. I like that we're not 100% sure, because, like you said there, years ago, if they came out, we knew who was going in, and we maybe weren't that excited. When you talk about a backline that potentially is Jamie Dobie or George Horn, Tom Jordan, Adam Hastings, Fergus Burke, Stafford McDowell, possibly Tom Jordan, Cam Redpath, Darcy Graham's still in there, Kyle Rowe, Kyle Stay. All of a sudden, you're like, wow, this is actually quite exciting.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's the difference. Is the quality of player left is no disrespect to those who've gone before, but is definitely better. I think the bit that I'm interested in is the two cap games Scotland have to win. So, and I think they'll be tough.
Is this the game? Is this the game that Gus Warr plays? Is this the game that
exactly? So is this the game that Gus Warr plays? But do you need Gus Warr and Fergus Burke? Is that fair to throw them in as a 9 and 10 together against the Maori, with Alex Masibaka at 8 and Finn Richardson at tight head? All of a sudden, if you pick the spine of your team, let's say tight head prop number 8, standoff, are 3 guys who've never played at that level. So I think there's a balance to be struck. I think the other bit of it that's interesting for me is this balance of guys who've played recently. Cam Redpath obviously played a couple of weeks ago in the Premiership final, but like it feels a while now since Edinburgh had a game. It's
not as long as the end of last season.
Well, no, that is definitely true. It's a long time since we saw Gregor Brown. So, do you need guys like that? When, Gilco's not played for a while, it's what do you do with George Turner? Because he's not played for Scotland for ages, but he's obviously been playing in Japan. So, I think there's loads of little bits to it that I'm really I'm interested in when the team comes out. I think it's tomorrow morning. So, yeah, there's a piece on the site. We've had a go at picking some teams, so folk can head over and have a read. But I just think there's a fine balance to be struck between starting well and actually the performance. For me, matters not more than the result. But if there's one Scotland lose, I would far rather they lost to the Maori than lose either of the cap games and it affects the world rankings.
Yeah, I think I'm feeling more positive now than I was before. This is typical Bruce, miserable and sceptical and questioning everything, and then it gets closer to game day. It's like, oh no, we're going to win the World Cup. It's fine. We'll be okay. No, I think and as is typical with me, everybody that I named there and highlighted wears from number 9 to 15, and I completely ignored everyone else that happened because I could possibly get 5 of the 7 backs. I'm not sure I would get 50% of that forward pack right. I don't know. And I think Ron O'Gara spoke about it today with the Lions. Depending on how you make up, is your best loose head actually the one that finishes the game? Is your and we're probably not going to know from Gregor's selection when he makes the announcement tomorrow who his first choice loose head is going into the capped games. I don't know. I don't know who he's going to pick in the front 5. I think Gilco probably will play and then come off. But other than that, I don't know. The back row, I would imagine. Well, I don't know because D play Jamie and so I don't know who he's going to pick for 1 to 8. At all. Actually, I said I wasn't going to get 4. I actually couldn't get 8. I couldn't get 1. I've no idea. I like the idea of George Turner playing, but he's. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Actually, I don't know. I'm talking rubbish.
The bit of it that I like is the idea that after however long talking to you about them on this podcast, we might get a Scotland back row at some stage in the next 3 weeks that has Andy Onyema Christie and Josh Bayliss in it at the same time.
That would be your dream. That would be your absolute dream.
Yeah, I think that would be that'd be pretty good. I think that would be pretty explosive. And apparently Alex Masabaka is pretty quick and got good feet. So yeah, it'd be pretty interesting to see the 3 of them go together.
I think the Maori also is quite a nice. I like it when you don't know what the opposition are going to do.
Yeah.
Right. You can analyse Fiji and Samoa. I know Samoa have got a new coach, but you've got a fair idea of what they're going to do. You know some of the players and what they're going to do. The Maori is an invitational team, and it's going to be tough to. You can't really analyse them. So I really like that. It then means Scotland have got to play what's in front of them, look after themselves, all those cliches that they give you in media training. But I really like that, and I think that should stand them in good stead for them going to Fiji, where you think you know what they're going to do, but because the Fijians still have that Fijian knack of pulling things out their backside, that Scotland have got to react and respond and try and stamp themselves on it. We've spoken about this. About Edinburgh this year, not so much Glasgow. When we talk about Scotland, or certainly I do, we raise our game for the opposition, but quite often we lower ourselves to the opposition.
Yeah.
So in these 3 games, you talking about performance, can Scotland be the dictating team, and it's up to everybody else to match Scotland rather than Edinburgh match Bath and match the Sharks, or Scotland match the All Blacks or the Springboks, but then it gets a bit messy against opposition that we should be dictating to. I think I've made myself clear. I'm not. Sometimes I bore myself.
You would have been far easier if you had just said Wales. We knew that's who you meant.
Right. Okay. Well,
you're right though. No, look, you're right. I think it's a fair point. I think if Scotland are the dominant team, I saw some quotes from the Maori camp. The captain, I think, had said, "We want to kind of knock Scotland off their perch." So that to me suggests they think they're underdogs, and I sometimes wish we're a wee bit. Sione, when he was captain during the autumn, sort of embraced being favourites against Australia. But it's such a Scottish thing to kind of play that down, and ultimately we're playing a thrown together Maori All Blacks team like Scotland should. They're an international team; they should win. But given the nature of the tour, I think that's what casts that doubt. So, yeah, I'd like to see... I think performance for me is important on the weekend. I think the other two are win at all costs. I would take 3-0. But I think the performance has to be good at the weekend to give the rest of it some oomph and actually generate some interest as well.
Yeah, I think I'm a bit sad about the kick-off time. I thought my days of getting up in the middle of the night were behind us, but maybe no.
Only a bit sad. I might literally shed tears by the end of the week at the idea of a 4:30 start.
I'm not feeling any sympathy. I was up at 5 o'clock on Monday morning for the wee and swimming. I was up at 5. I had walked 10k this morning before 8 a.m.
Yeah,
and that included the top of Arthur's Seat to speak to 5 kids for Philadelphia who were there to watch the non-existent sunrise.
I don't think I had walked very far by 8 a.m. I must admit.
So getting up then means I'll actually miss the second half because I'll need to take the bairn to swimming. Anyway, I'll put my tiny violin away. So in other news, a couple of signings 3 signings maybe to talk about. Stu Lancaster's boys coming to Glasgow. Dan Lancaster, I know less about him than I know about Lancaster Bombers. So this one's over to you, big fella.
Yeah, so played for Leeds. I think Leeds was sort of where he made his kind of breakthrough, then went to Leicester. Left Leicester when Steve Borthwick was sort of in charge there. Went to Ealing, then incredibly, I think spent 2 seasons at Ealing. But then the opportunity last summer came up for him to go to Paris, and just how it so happened his old man was the coach. That didn't go really that well for either of them. Went better for Dan than it did for Stuart, who got sacked in February. I spoke to Dan.
That must have been comfortable for his boy, yeah.
Around that time, and he did say, "Look, that was really uncomfortable." I had to basically go to my dad's successor and say, "Give me a couple of days to get my head around this. Thanks very much." Obviously, his dad, when I spoke to Dan, I think it was when Scotland were in Paris, and he said, "My dad will not be out of work too long, so it has proved." He's now back at Connacht, and look, I think he did really good stuff with Leinster, so I'm interested to see how that goes. But Dan, 10, 12, I think, look, it's been on the radar for ages, this, and initially I think it was a non-starter. I think probably where this has arisen is Glasgow signed Charlie Savala, who we know from his time at Edinburgh. He then got injured towards the end of the season playing for Northampton. And if you look at where Glasgow are and who they've obviously lost Tom Jordan. It leaves them really with Adam Hastings, who could end up in the Scotland squad, plus Duncan Weir, whose Scotland days are probably behind him. He would possibly admit that. Now, if you've then not got Charlie Savala as that other option, you probably want somebody who, like Savala and TJ, has that flexibility of playing 10 and 12. So I think they've gone for Dan Lancaster. I would like to think there'll maybe be one or two more through the door at Glasgow before the end of the summer. It feels like they could do with a bit more, but we'll wait and see. But yeah, no, I think, look, Racing had their struggles. Racing are still sort of searching for that elusive trophy. The Owen Farrell thing went as well as the Sia Khaleesi experiment the season before. I think it's a tough place to sort of find your feet, and obviously living in Paris, I think, is also would take a bit of adjusting to. So, yeah, let's see how he gets on in Glasgow.
I'd be all right. I lived in Stow for my first 18 years of my life, so I'd slide seamlessly into life in Paris.
Yes, indeed. No difference whatsoever.
A lot of pavement cafes in Stow, croissants. Yeah. If you had to put two standoffs at sort of opposite ends of the spectrum, you would have Donkey Weir and Adam Hastings, wouldn't you? So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think Charlie's probably a bit closer to the Hastings end. I don't think Dan's that. I still think Donkey's probably out there on his own for a bit. I'm probably closer to that end next to me and Donkey stood there. But no, good. And I kind of, he's Scots qualified, obviously, saying
yeah,
that's not his only reason for coming. And I don't know, and I don't know enough about him because we've now got, Savala's Scottish qualified. I think Duncan Weir's Scottish qualified. Obviously, Hastings is there, Fergus, Burke. So there's a lot in that mix behind Finn and possibly Tom Jordan. I don't
yeah,
know who would
yeah.
be Gregor's second choice. So there's opportunities for players to say, right, it's me. Obviously, the players who are away with Scotland now, they've got that chance. Depending on what happens, Lancaster gets a shot, or Tom Jordan tears it up. But it'll be interesting to see where Pat Lam plays him at Bristol. So it's exciting to think there's lots of players in the mix, and somebody else coming back into the mix. Callum Hunter-Hill returning to Edinburgh from his travels down south, and obviously he was going well when he went to London, and then the last couple of years hasn't been quite as smooth.
Yeah, it didn't probably go that well for him at Northampton for whatever reason. But look, I think second row, I think I spoke about this at the end of the season. When you looked at Edinburgh's second row options, you think, well, okay, Gilco, Marshall Sykes, and Sam Skinner are probably the three. Outside of that, there's not a huge amount of matches there. And I think the one thing that Callum Hunter-Hill now has is games under his belt. I think there's been a few comments that I've read about, I hope Edinburgh have done their due diligence in terms of his fitness. That, will obviously be a concern to a degree. But I think he's somebody who's probably far enough down the Scotland kind of pecking order that if you can get him in and around, he could potentially become that the fourth one with Marshall and Gilco and Sam Skinner that can kind of compete in there and give them a wee bit more strength and depth, and maybe gives a Ewan McVie or a Rob Carmichael another bit to kind of continue their development in the background more.
And because he's so far down the Scotland pecking order, it probably means Edinburgh can play him every minute of every game if he is fit, and those other boys will go away with Scotland squads. But yeah, it's an interesting one, and it puts more in the mix. It does feel a bit funny that Jamie Hodgson goes and Callum Hunter-Hill comes in, but those are the moving parts and situations that we don't know the ins and outs of those things, do we? Well, maybe you do.
Well, no, I think in this case you're right. I think it does seem on the face of it a strange move to bring a guy back who's a year older than the guy who's leaving, and they both sort of seem like similar players. But maybe Callum Hunter-Hill is more of that tight headlock that gives you a bit more set piece. But I suppose we'll wait and see how it all kind of pans out. But I think Edinburgh have done well. Edinburgh have done a fair bit of business this summer, but I mean, a lot of kind of squad players have come in, so I'm interested to see how they kind of fit in, how much they're involved early in the season, particularly if these guys who are away with Lions, Scotland are given a rest, and ultimately if they're up to the quality, because I think some of them have got big shoes to fill.
Speaking of big shoes, Ross McKnight signed a 1-year deal.
Yes, a man with big shoes. No, look, I think he played well in that game again, the friendly game against Saracens, and I just think it's a sign that if you're a club player, like, don't give up. There maybe are still opportunities, and like, for all that people have criticised Scottish rugby in the past for maybe not being kind of very insular and looking at schools or looking at certain clubs for a kind of path, I think it shows well, actually, if you're making a big dent in, playing for Stirling County, or if you make,
I get it, but I'm gonna kind of disagree with you on the don't give up. I'm not sure. I don't know Ross McKnight. I've met him. I saw him against Saracens. I thought he did well. He's played a lot of sevens with Shogun, who were Samurai. He's done well with Stirling County. I'm not sure if he was. I'm determined to be a pro. The bit about not giving up is he obviously loves the game, and he was at a club that was able to give him kind of the platform, but he was playing at the highest level that was possible to him. He obviously was still looking after himself because he's a big unit and he can shift, and he's one of those guys, a bit like Duan, if you're a big winger, then people go looking for, but he's a bit softer, he can't tackle, or he's no good on the high balls, and look for the things that they're maybe not so good at, rather than saying, but actually here's all the things he is good at, and we'll work on those other bits if we need to. I just like that he was still playing. He's probably absolutely delighted that he's got himself a year's contract to see what happens. There's not a lot of opportunities around now because the market is saturated with rugby players. So for him to get a shot at a club that I think matters to him because he's Scottish and he's played for them, I think it's class. And I look at Jordan Edmonds, who I coached at Boroughmuir and was desperate for him to get a shot, and it never quite worked. And he has now played, but unfortunately he's finished with that and just still doing a bit at Boroughmuir. But there are players around. That you're right. The clubs do have players. It's probably more those that sign contracts having the faith in that level they've played at. They've been very good, and they can. You're signing potential rather than performance. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I think it's one of those other. Look, 2 years ago, Ross McKnight would have been lost because the way that the structure was, if you were his age, you couldn't be an academy player and be his age. Now I think that having that flexibility of signing academy players at 23, 22, 23, you actually are saying to them, okay, you might not be ready at 19, but like very, very few are to go and then play pro rugby. And I think it shows a couple of years of sort of working hard and as you say, playing at the highest level that was still available to him. Because it would be easy to say, "Oh, do you know what? I'll chuck this. I'll go and play at a level that's I'm far too good for, but I'll be the big fish in the small pond." But still push yourself.
He's also had some great input. He's had Duncan Hodge and Ben Cairns and Eddie and Adam Ash and Sean Kennedy, and he's had good people to work with, and that's that bit about not giving up. Unfortunately, there's a lot of players who are, Tuesday, Thursday, there's not as many there. Training facilities are not, there's not a lot of the resources to keep these players progressing and improving. And I'm getting onto one of Bruce's tangents, so I'm gonna pull myself back from that. I did want to talk about the under-20s. Obviously, England was a tough old shift. It was always going to be. I think they fared reasonably well. There's a lot of changes for Australia. They've got to be targeting this Aussie game as a chance.
They've got to be. I think they've. Look, would Scotland play well, and I think that I can't overstate the importance of having Freddie back. Like, I just think Freddie, the person, and the player, is almost like having Sione, the equivalent in the senior team. He seems to just lift everybody around him, and I think they aspire to playing at his level, which is I think very, very high. Chatting to folk who know Freddie better than certainly I do. There was a game, I think about 18 months ago, where it was kind of well sort of expected that or well acknowledged that Freddie was better than Henry Pollock on the day. Now look where Henry Pollock is, and that's the opportunity and being afforded that level of sort of exposure. So I think that's a massive bonus. I spoke to Stuart Edwards about Freddie, and he said, "Well, look, I think he's further ahead now than where Hamish Watson was at the same stage of his career, and look at what Hamish has gone on to do." So I think, again, very typically Scottish, we sort of play down how good he could be, but at that level, he'll make a massive difference. I think they'll have learned primarily about playing in that ridiculously uncomfortable heat, but also if they switch off, which they did against England, or if they make mistakes and end up with men in the bin, those teams at that level are good enough to punish them, and it'll be game over before the guy's back on.
Yeah, so it's an interesting back row. Ollie Duncan out of Edinburgh Academy, Freddie Douglas, obviously Stu Melboy, and then Gabby's boy at 8.
I love Gabby's boy and not Kenny's.
Oh, I'm not giving Kenny any credit for that at all. No, the three of them, that's a strong back row that you hope goes well. Obviously, big Ollie's back and doing it tight head, and he's probably as valuable as anybody's going to be because you didn't get many Bairns that size. And that's a muckle human. I'm delighted Hector Patterson's getting a shot at 9 because he's somebody that for Edinburgh looking at next year when Ali Price is away, Hector, I know that Conor McAlpine's probably ahead of him in the pecking order, but Ben Veliko, there's I think Hector Patterson at some point will have to play for Edinburgh next year.
Yeah,
and I hope he gets a crack. I hope he goes well. He's daft as a brush, but he's a great kid. I've got so much time for him. And then having Kerr-Yule and Johnny in the centres alike, I think that's an interesting one. And my boy Isaac's on the bench. I'm hoping he gets a run. He didn't get to play against England, so I'm hoping he gets a run. So there's quite a lot to get excited about. And obviously Seb Stevens on the bench. And
yeah, I think just to go back to your point about Hector, like exactly the same conversation about Fergus Watson at Glasgow. It seems Fergus Watson's played a lot at 15, but he's on the wing for this. He could be an option for Glasgow on the wing. And when you look at who they've lost in the summer, there's not actually that many sort of senior wingers left beyond the Scotland guys. So good for him. Yeah, Seb Stephen on the bench. I think that front row, Seb Stephen, Ben White, Jamie Stewart, is better than Scotland have had as a backup bench at this level in the past. I think it's you've always felt like, right, Ollie Blythe Lafferty and Ollie McKenna are going to have to play 78 minutes and they'll be hanging on. But actually, Finlay Brown's covering the under-20s for us in Italy, and he was speaking to Kenny earlier, and it sounds like Kenny and Scotland are going to go for Australia up front. So yeah, I'm pretty interested to see how he uses the two packs. And yeah, Charlie Moss, Mark Fife on the bench are two pretty big guys as well. So I'm sure they'll come on and throw themselves straight into it. Yeah, this has to be the one. I think you look at the results. Australia lost by 70, or they took 70 against South Africa. England and South Africa look like they're miles in front.
South Africa are
frightening. So this has to be the one for Scotland, and I think obviously the no relegation thing that has I think yet to be confirmed by World Rugby, but certainly has been confirmed by Scottish Rugby to us, takes a bit of the heat off, but you don't want to go there and take 3 hidings in your pool games. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to watch on Friday.
Yeah, it would be class for them to get a W against Australia. I don't know enough about it. I don't know what Australia did with their selection. The last one, the 20s result that had the eyebrows raised was the New Zealand-Italy. Like, when you're talking, and we've got this Scottish bias of, but we're Scotland, we've always been the top 8 countries in the world, and you see an Italian under-20s 14-5, I think it was, against your baby Blacks. Like, oh, wow, that's, and we don't know what the selections are with the squads, and I certainly don't have that knowledge, but Scotland are going to have to do the best with everything they've got, and it's nice hearing that we've got some depth and we've got players that are going to have to play at the highest of our club levels. I mean, Edinburgh and Glasgow by that, and other boys that potentially, it'd be great if Ruben Logan was to feature in Premiership games that really matter this year, or European games this year that matter. So, it's exciting.
Talking about European games, if Ruben Logan is to play in a European game, it'd be quite cool to see him play against Glasgow.
Totally. That was in the heat. I mean, I spent a little bit of time this afternoon with Johnny Matthews and Magnus Bradbury, and the two of them were talking about the European draws. And I was asking them, does that mean we'll be taking some of the games to the bigger stadiums? And obviously, I knew the answer I was going to get, because the players want to play at Scotstoun and want to play at the Hive. And it'll be interesting to see how they get on, because the target is win your home games.
But I mean, when you look at those pools,
tough.
Could they have been any tougher?
If you'd thrown Leinster in, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, to lose Claremont, Sharks, Saracens, Glasgow, Sale is like, good luck, lads. And then, for Edinburgh, Gloucester has to be the one I think that Edinburgh look at. And then if they can get Cast at the Hive.
Yeah, they'll beat Cast at Hive.
Because I think,
beat Gloucester away.
I'm assuming already that Cast are going to say, well, we've chucked it. We'll focus on the top 14.
Artificial pitch in Edinburgh in January. No thanks. We'll send the academy team. So actually, talking of that sort of optimism, we're now looking at probably an Edinburgh and Glasgow final.
Yeah, and they're going to share the Champions Cup.
Yeah. It goes to penalty shootout, and they kind of get a winner.
Interesting. I wonder who would. I mean, let's not even go there.
Johnny Matthews would be kicking the goals. He's telling me he's playing five-a-side, so Johnny Matthews, he's the man.
You probably sent Johnny Matthews into cold sweats and Franco into a frantic panic now. That's assuming that they're watching our ramblings, of course.
I was hoping both of them were going to be in New Zealand, but there you go. That's another story. Big fella, good to speak to you. Good to see you again. We're back on it, and there's so much rugby going on. It is bonkers. So let's meet up again next week and we'll talk about it. And I said we're going to be finished 20 minutes ago. So well played. Good to see you. One final word from our sponsor. Scotland Rugby News was brought to you by S1 Jobs. If it's time to hand in your transfer request, then head over to s1jobs.com and upload your CV right now. There are thousands of jobs across Scotland, and you can find the one that's for you at S1 Jobs. So go and start your search right now. In the meantime, enjoy everything that's coming. Enjoy the sunshine, and we'll see you all again next week. In the meantime, look after yourselves. Cheers.